I found out I missed my own son's wedding because of a lie that kept me out of the most important day of his life. When I confronted my daughter-in-law about it, she looked me in the eyes and said I was too emotionally unstable to be there. I found out my son got married through Martha Henderson's casual comment about her hydrangeas. We were standing at our adjoining fence on that crisp October morning, me still in my bathrobe clutching a lukewarm coffee mug, when she mentioned seeing the most beautiful wedding photos on Facebook, something about how romantic it looked, all those fairy lights and autumn leaves. My stomach dropped before my brain even processed why. "Oh, you mean David's wedding?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay steady even though my hands were already trembling. Martha's face went white. That look people get when they realize they've just stepped on a landmine. "Sarah, I thought you knew. I mean, I assumed you were there. The photos looked so lovely and..." I don't remember walking back into my house. I don't remember sitting down at my kitchen table or opening my laptop. But somehow I was there, staring at a screen full of pictures that felt like looking through someone else's window into a life I should have been part of. My son David in a navy blue suit I'd never seen before, standing next to Rebecca in a dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Smiling faces I recognized, faces I didn't, all celebrating something I'd been completely excluded from. The last text I'd gotten from Rebecca was 3 weeks ago. "Sorry, Sarah. We had to postpone the wedding due to family complications. Nothing serious, just need more time to plan everything properly. Hope you understand." I'd sent back heart emojis and offers to help with anything they needed. I'd been understanding. I'd been patient. I'd been played. My coffee had gone cold in my hands as I scrolled through photo after photo. There was my ex-husband, James, looking comfortable and happy, his arm around his girlfriend, Linda. There was Rebecca's entire family, people I'd met at birthday dinners and holiday gatherings over the past 2 years. There was David's best friend, Marcus, who used to call me his second mom when he was growing up. Everyone was there except me. The worst part wasn't even the exclusion itself. It was seeing how genuinely happy everyone looked. Like my absence hadn't created some awkward hole in the celebration. Like I simply didn't matter enough for anyone to miss me. I called David immediately, my fingers shaking so hard I could barely dial. Straight to voicemail, the generic automated message, not even his voice. I tried again. Same thing. Then I tried Rebecca. "Sarah?" She sounded surprised, maybe a little guilty, but not as much as someone should sound when they've just been caught in a massive lie. "Rebecca? I just saw the photos." Silence. Long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. "I can explain," she finally said, but her tone was already shifting into that defensive pitch I'd learned to recognize over the past year. The one that meant whatever came next would somehow be my fault. "I'm listening." "David was worried about your anxiety levels. After what happened at your work and how stressed you've been lately, we just thought it would be better if we kept things small and quiet. We didn't want to put any pressure on you." My anxiety levels. 3 months ago, I'd had what my doctor called a panic attack during a particularly brutal week at the insurance company where I work as a claims adjuster. 3 panic-filled days of dealing with hurricane damage claims while my manager breathed down my neck about processing times. I'd gone home early one day and mentioned it to David when he called to check on me. Apparently, that moment of human vulnerability had been twisted into evidence that I was too fragile to handle my own son's wedding. "Rebecca, that's not your decision to make." David agreed with me, Sarah. We both felt, "Let me talk to him. He's at work. Then I'll call him there." "Sarah, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. What's done is done. We can have a nice dinner next week to celebrate. Just the 4 of us." A consolation prize. A participation trophy for the mother who apparently couldn't be trusted with the real thing. I hung up and immediately called David's office. His secretary, Melissa, had known me since David started working there 5 years ago. Oh, hi, Mrs. Coleman. David's actually taking a few personal days. He and Rebecca just got back from their honeymoon in... She stopped abruptly, and I could practically hear her mental gears grinding. Oh no, oh Sarah, I'm so sorry. I assumed you knew about... It's okay, Melissa. Could you just ask him to call me when he gets a chance? But even as I said it, I knew he wouldn't call. 3 hours later, I was proven right. Instead, I got a text. Mom, I know you're upset, but Rebecca and I made the decision we felt was best for everyone. We'll talk soon. The decision they felt was best for everyone, as if I were some kind of problem that needed to be managed rather than the woman who had raised him, who had worked double shifts to pay for his college, who had been there for every scraped knee and broken heart and career uncertainty. I spent that entire day in a fog of disbelief and hurt that felt physical, like someone had reached inside my chest and rearranged everything. I kept thinking I must be overreacting, that there had to be some misunderstanding. But every time I looked at those photos again, the reality settled deeper into my bones. My son had gotten married and decided I didn't belong there. By evening, I was angry, not the hot, explosive kind of anger that burns out quickly, but the cold, determined kind that calcifies into something harder. I started making phone calls. First, I called my sister Linda in Phoenix. She listened to the whole story without interrupting, which is something Linda never does unless the situation is genuinely serious. Sarah, that's completely fucked up, she said finally. Linda never minces words. Even if they were worried about your stress levels or whatever bullshit excuse they gave you, they should have talked to you about it, not lied to you and then excluded you from the most important day of David's life. Hearing someone else say it out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. I wasn't overreacting. This wasn't about my anxiety or my fragility or whatever story they'd constructed to justify their choices. This was about being deliberately pushed out of my son's life. What are you going to do? Linda asked. I didn't have an answer yet, but as I sat in my living room that night, looking at the framed photos of David at various stages of his life scattered around my coffee table, I made a promise to myself. I wasn't going to just accept this. I wasn't going to quietly disappear from my son's life because it was convenient for everyone else. I was going to fight for him. The next morning, I drove to James's apartment. We'd been divorced for 7 years, but we'd maintained what I thought was a reasonably cordial relationship. We talked about David regularly, coordinated holidays and birthdays, even had coffee together occasionally to catch up on our respective lives. James answered the door in his weekend clothes, looking relaxed and unsurprised to see me, which should have been my first clue. Sarah, I was wondering when you'd show up. Were you? He stepped aside to let me in, but something about his posture told me this wasn't going to go the way I'd hoped. I'd come here thinking we could be united in our confusion and hurt. Two parents who had both been excluded from their son's wedding for reasons that didn't make sense. James, what the hell happened? How did we both get shut out of David's wedding? He was quiet for a long moment, avoiding my eyes in a way that made my stomach start churning again. Sarah, I wasn't shut out. The words hit me like cold water. What do you mean? I was there, at the wedding. I stared at him, waiting for him to elaborate, to explain how that was possible when I'd clearly seen him in the photos. But the explanation, when it came, was worse than anything I'd imagined. Rebecca came to me about a month ago. She was concerned about how you'd been handling stress lately, and she thought it would be better for everyone if the wedding stayed small and low-key. She asked me to talk to David about it, and you did. Sarah, you have to understand. After your panic attacks at work and the way you've been calling David more frequently lately, checking up on him all the time, Rebecca felt like you might be going through something that could make a wedding stressful for you. So instead of asking me how I was feeling, You all just decided to exclude me entirely. We thought it would be easier for everyone except me. James, I had 3 panic attacks over the course of 2 days because my boss was being an asshole about claim processing during hurricane season. That doesn't make me mentally unstable. That makes me human. But you've also been... you've been pretty involved in David's life lately. Rebecca mentioned that you call him almost every day, and you've been giving a lot of unsolicited advice about their relationship and their finances. I felt something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't just about my anxiety. This was about Rebecca systematically building a case against me, collecting every phone call, every piece of motherly concern, every moment where I'd overstepped some invisible boundary, and presenting it to my ex-husband and my son as evidence that I was becoming a problem. James, I call David 3 or 4 times a week, max. And I've never given unsolicited advice about their relationship. The only time I commented on their finances was when David specifically asked me what I thought about them buying a house right now with interest rates so high. But I could see in his face that it didn't matter what the truth was. Rebecca's version had already taken root, and James had chosen to believe it because believing it made his life easier. Look, Sarah, what's done is done. They're married now, they're happy, and maybe this is a good opportunity for you to take a step back and let them build their life together without feeling like they need to manage your emotional needs. My emotional needs, as if wanting to be present for my son's wedding was some kind of pathological attachment. I left James's apartment feeling like I was seeing everything clearly for the first time. This wasn't about my mental health or my stress levels or my tendency to be an involved mother. This was about Rebecca systematically isolating David from his family of origin, and everyone was going along with it because it was easier than confronting the truth. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went through my old photo albums looking for pictures from when David was growing up. I found what I was looking for in a box of miscellaneous photos from family gatherings, pictures of James's mother, Eleanor, who had died 3 years ago. Eleanor. And I had never gotten along well, but looking at these photos, I remembered something I'd forgotten. During the early years of my marriage to James, Eleanor had gradually been excluded from more and more family events. James's sister would organize gatherings and somehow forget to invite Eleanor. Holiday celebrations would be planned around times when Eleanor couldn't attend. Birthday parties would happen without her knowledge. At the time, I'd been young and self-absorbed enough to not pay much attention. Eleanor was difficult sometimes, opinionated and stubborn, and it had been easier to go along with the exclusions than to fight for her inclusion. But now, looking at those photos, I could see the pattern, the way Eleanor's face had grown more distant and resigned over the years, the way she'd stopped asking about family events and started accepting that she simply wouldn't be included. I'd watched my mother-in-law be systematically pushed out of her son's life, and I'd said nothing. I'd been complicit in it because it made my life easier. Now the same thing was happening to me. But this time, I wasn't going to be complicit. This time, I was going to fight. That night, I sat down at my kitchen table with a legal pad and started making a plan. I wrote down everything I could remember about Rebecca's behavior over the past 2 years, every conversation that had felt off, every time she'd managed to redirect David's attention away from me or create conflict where none had existed before. The pattern was subtle but clear once I started looking for it. Rebecca had spent 2 years carefully positioning herself as the reasonable, mature voice in David's ear, while simultaneously portraying me as increasingly needy and unstable. And it had worked perfectly. But I wasn't the same woman who had quietly watched Eleanor disappear from family gatherings. I'd raised a son mostly on my own after James and I divorced. I'd built a career in insurance, which meant I'd spent years learning to see through people's lies and manipulations. I'd survived my mother's death, my divorce, David's teenage rebellion, and countless other challenges that life had thrown at me. I wasn't going to lose my son without a fight. The question was, how do you fight for someone who's been convinced they don't want you around? I was about to find out. The answer came to me 3 days later when I found Eleanor's diary. I'd been putting off cleaning out the attic storage space that James and I had never gotten around to dividing after our divorce. Boxes of Christmas decorations, old tax returns, David's childhood toys that I couldn't bring myself to donate. But somewhere between my anger and my determination to understand what was happening to my family, I'd developed an almost manic need to organize everything, to put things in their proper place. Eleanor's diary was tucked inside a shoebox full of sympathy cards from her funeral, wrapped in tissue paper like something precious. The leather cover was worn soft from years of handling, and her neat handwriting filled page after page with daily observations, family complaints, and grocery lists. I almost put it back without reading it. Diaries are private things, and Eleanor. And I had never been close enough for me to feel entitled to her most personal thoughts. But something made me flip to a random page near the middle. March 15th, 1998. James called to tell me that Sarah is organizing David's birthday party this year. Apparently last year's celebration was too much work for me, even though I've been hosting David's birthday for 6 years and never once complained. Sarah has some very specific ideas about themes and decorations. James says it's because she wants to be more involved as David's mother, but I can't help feeling like I'm being pushed aside. Hands were shaking as I read. 1998. David would have been 8 years old. I remembered that birthday party vividly because it had been the first one I'd really taken charge of planning. I'd been so proud of the elaborate pirate theme, the treasure hunt I'd organized, the homemade cake shaped like a ship. I'd never once considered that Eleanor might have wanted to continue hosting David's birthdays. I'd just assumed that as David's mother, it was natural for me to take over. I flipped forward a few pages. April the 2nd, 1998. Easter at Sarah and James's house again. When I asked if I could bring my traditional ham, Sarah said she'd already ordered one from the fancy grocery store because she wanted everything to coordinate. I'm not sure what my ham was supposed to coordinate with, but I brought deviled eggs instead. Sarah mentioned twice how much better the store-bought ham looked in photos. I remembered that Easter too. I'd been so focused on creating perfect holiday memories for David, on being the kind of mother who could host beautiful family gatherings, that I'd completely bulldozed over Eleanor's traditions without even realizing it. But the entry that made my blood run cold came from later that year. September 12th, 1998. James called to tell me about David's school play. Apparently there are only 2 tickets per family, and since Sarah and James are going, I won't be able to attend. He said they'll videotape it for me. I asked why they couldn't request additional tickets from the school, and James said Sarah felt it was important for David to see his parents united in supporting him, without the distraction of managing multiple family members. I suppose that makes me a distraction now. I set the diary down and walked to the bathroom, where I threw up everything I'd eaten that day. When I came back, I forced myself to keep reading, even though every page felt like a knife to my chest. Entry after entry detailed the same pattern I was experiencing now. Gradual exclusion disguised as consideration for everyone's best interests. Traditions being updated without consultation. Family events being planned around Eleanor's availability rather than including her in the planning. And, in every entry, Eleanor tried so hard to be understanding, to convince herself that maybe James and Sarah really did know what was best for everyone. The final entries were the hardest to read. June 3rd, 2015. David graduated from college today. James sent me a photo since I wasn't able to attend. The ceremony was small, family only. I asked James what made me not family, but he just said it was complicated. Sarah had apparently expressed concern that my arthritis would make it difficult, for me to sit through a long ceremony, and they didn't want me to be uncomfortable. I never said anything about being uncomfortable. I would have gladly sat through 10 ceremonies to see my grandson graduate. David had graduated 8 years ago. I remembered the ceremony clearly because I'd been so proud, taking dozens of photos and crying happy tears when his name was called. James had been there, beaming with pride. David's girlfriend at the time, Amanda, had been there. But Eleanor hadn't been there, and I'd never even asked why. I'd been complicit in pushing David's grandmother out of his life, and now his wife was doing the same thing to me. The cosmic justice of it was almost too bitter to swallow. But the diary held one more revelation that changed everything. Eleanor's final entry, dated just 2 weeks before she died. November 8th, 2021. I've been thinking about patterns lately, about how families repeat the same mistakes across generations without even realizing it. I did the same thing to James's father's mother when I was a young wife, convinced that I knew better, that I could create a better family dynamic by limiting her influence. I told myself it was for everyone's good, but really it was about control, about insecurity, about wanting to be the most important woman in my husband's life. Now I'm reaping what I sowed, and I can't even be angry about it because I understand exactly how Sarah feels. She's protecting her place in her family the same way I protected mine. The tragedy is that there's room for everyone if we could just stop seeing love as something finite that has to be rationed. I hope someday someone breaks this cycle. I closed the diary and sat in that dusty attic for an hour, crying for Eleanor, for myself, for the grandmother my son would never really know, and for the cycle of exclusion that had claimed 3 generations of women in my family. But Eleanor's words had also given me something unexpected: understanding. Rebecca wasn't evil. She was scared and insecure and trying to protect her place in David's life the only way she knew how. Just like I had been 25 years ago. Just like Eleanor had been before that. Understanding didn't make it hurt less, but it gave me a strategy. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to the coffee shop where David used to meet his friends every Saturday when he lived closer to home. It was a long shot, but I knew that Marcus still lived in the neighborhood, and maybe some of David's other college friends would be there. I was right. Marcus was sitting at a corner table with 2 other guys I recognized from David's graduation party. They all looked uncomfortable when they saw me walk in. "Hi, boys," I said, trying to sound casual despite the fact that my heart was beating so hard I was sure they could hear it. "Mind if I join you for a few minutes?" They exchanged glances, but Marcus gestured to an empty chair. "Sure, Mrs. C. How are you doing?" It was such a loaded question given the circumstances, but Marcus's tone was gentle, almost pitying, which told me he knew exactly what had happened. "I've been better," I said honestly. "I was hoping you might be able to help me understand something." More glances, the kind that meant they'd already discussed this among themselves. "Look, Mrs. Coleman," said Jake, one of David's roommates from college. "We all think what happened is fucked up, if that's what you're wondering. But David's our friend, and we don't want to get in the middle of family drama." "I'm not asking you to get in the middle. I'm just trying to understand how we got here." Marcus leaned forward, his expression serious. "Mrs. C, can I ask you something? When was the last time you and David had a conversation that wasn't about his relationship with Rebecca or about choices he was making that you had opinions about?" The question hit me like a slap, not because it was unfair, but because it was absolutely fair and I didn't have a good answer. I care about his happiness. If I had opinions, it's because I love him. Right, but when was the last time you just talked about his job or his hobbies or movies he's watching or anything that wasn't you trying to guide him toward better decisions? I opened my mouth to defend myself, but Marcus held up his hand. "I'm not saying your advice was bad, Mrs. C. Most of the time you were probably right. But Rebecca started pointing out to David that every conversation with you turned into some kind of life coaching session. And once she said it, he couldn't unsee it. So she was deliberately undermining my relationship with him. Maybe, or maybe she was pointing out something that was actually happening, and David was finally ready to hear it. I felt like I was falling down a well. Everything I'd thought I understood about the situation was shifting beneath me. Marcus, do you think David is happy with Rebecca? Another pause, another exchange of glances. Honestly, I think David is happy with the idea of Rebecca. She's beautiful, she's got her shit together professionally, she makes him feel like an adult in a way that, well, in a way that maybe he didn't feel when he was still getting regular check-ins from his mom about every aspect of his life. But that's what mothers do. We care, we worry, we want to help. I know, and David knows that too, deep down. But Mrs. C, you've got to understand something about David. He's always felt like he had to choose between making you happy and making himself happy. And Rebecca was the first person who ever made him feel like he could just be himself without disappointing anyone. I never wanted him to choose. But you kind of did, didn't you? Every time you questioned his decisions or offered unsolicited advice about his finances or his career or his relationship, you were asking him to prioritize your peace of mind over his own judgment. I wanted to argue with him, but the truth was sitting in my chest like a stone. I had been doing exactly what Marcus said, not maliciously, not consciously, but consistently. I'd been so afraid of David making mistakes that I'd forgotten to trust him to learn from his own experiences. So, what do I do now, honestly? Give him space. Stop trying to fix this. Stop trying to fix him. Just let him know you love him and you're there if he needs you, and then actually let him come to you instead of constantly reaching out. It was the hardest advice anyone had ever given me because it meant accepting that I'd contributed to my own exclusion from David's life. I left the coffee shop feeling more lost than when I'd arrived. But later that afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in months. I called my own therapist. Dr. Rodriguez had helped me through my divorce and my mother's death, and I'd stopped seeing her regularly about 2 years ago when I felt like I had my life back on track. But clearly, I'd missed some things. "Sarah," she said when I called, "it's good to hear from you. What's going on?" I told her everything: the wedding, the exclusion, Eleanor's diary, the conversation with Marcus. By the time I finished, I was crying again. "Sarah, can I ask you something that might be difficult to hear?" "I think this whole conversation is going to be difficult to hear. When you describe your relationship with David over the past few years, it sounds like you've been operating from a place of fear rather than trust. Fear that he'll make mistakes, fear that he'll get hurt, fear that he'll grow up and not need you anymore. Does that feel accurate?" "Maybe, but isn't that normal for mothers?" "To some degree, yes, but when that fear starts driving most of your interactions with your adult child, it can become problematic. It sounds like Rebecca may have recognized that pattern and used it to her advantage, but that doesn't mean the pattern wasn't real. So, this is my fault." "Sarah, this isn't about fault. This is about understanding the dynamics that led to this situation so you can change them. You can't control what Rebecca does or what David chooses, but you can control how you show up in this relationship going forward." "But how do I rebuild a relationship with someone who doesn't want to talk to me?" "You start by changing yourself. You work on becoming the kind of mother David would want to have a relationship with, regardless of whether he's ready to have that relationship right now." That night, I sat down and wrote a letter to David. Not the angry, defensive letter I'd written and rewritten a dozen times in my head, but an honest one. "Dear David," I began, "I'm writing this not because I expect you to respond, but because there are things I need to say that I should have said a long time ago. I'm sorry that my love for you sometimes came across as control. I'm sorry that my fear of you getting hurt sometimes prevented you from learning to navigate your own life. I'm sorry that I made you feel like you had to choose between your mother and your wife. That was never what I intended, but I understand now that impact matters more than intention. I wrote 3 pages. I apologized for specific incidents. I could remember where I'd overstepped boundaries or offered unwanted advice. I told him I was proud of the man he'd become, with or without my guidance. I told him I loved Rebecca because he loved her, and that I wanted to find a way to be part of their life that felt good for everyone. And then I did the hardest thing I'd ever done as a mother. I mailed the letter without expecting anything in return. 2 weeks passed without a response. Then 3 weeks. I forced myself not to call, not to text, not to drive by his apartment or show up at his work. I kept myself busy by finally cleaning out that attic, donating boxes of David's childhood belongings I'd been hoarding, and starting to build a life that didn't revolve around managing other people's choices. It was the longest I'd gone without talking to David since he'd left for college. But on a Thursday evening in November, my phone rang. "Mom?" His voice was tentative, younger sounding than I'd heard in years. "Hi, sweetheart. I got your letter." "Okay. I want to talk, but I need you to know that things can't go back to the way they were before." "I know. Rebecca and I are working on some stuff in couples counseling, and part of that is figuring out healthy boundaries with both of our families." "That sounds like a good idea." "Really?" "Really. David, I just want you to be happy, whatever that looks like." There was a long pause, and when he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. "Mom, I missed you. Even when I was angry with you, even when I thought space was what we needed, I missed talking to you." I closed my eyes and tried not to cry. "I missed you too, baby. Can we try again? Differently this time?" "I'd like that very much." We talked for an hour that night, not about Rebecca or the wedding or the months of silence between us, but about his job and a book he was reading and a vacation he and Rebecca were planning. It was the most normal conversation we'd had in over a year. When we hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt since that devastating morning when Martha Henderson had told me about the wedding photos. Hope. But I also knew this was just the beginning. Rebuilding trust takes time, and changing lifelong patterns of behavior doesn't happen overnight. Rebecca was still David's wife, still the person he'd chosen to build a life with, and I was still learning how to love him without trying to manage him. The real test would come when Rebecca and I had to face each other, when we had to figure out how to coexist in David's life without competing for his loyalty. I had no idea how that was going to work, but for the first time in months, I believed it might be possible. The call came at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday in February, 4 months after David and I had started rebuilding our relationship. "Mom?" His voice was shaky, scared in a way I hadn't heard since he was a child, calling me from a sleepover because he'd had a nightmare. "What's wrong, honey?" "Rebecca's in the hospital. She had some bleeding last night. We're at St. Mary's and the doctors are running tests, but they think she might be losing the baby." I was already reaching for my clothes before he finished the sentence. "I'm on my way." "Mom, wait. Rebecca doesn't want you here right now. She's really scared and she just wants her family." The words stung, but I forced myself to focus on what David needed instead of what I was feeling. "Okay, but I'm here if you need anything at all. Do you want me to call your dad?" "I already called him. He's flying in from Denver." "Good. David, is there anything I can do? Groceries, taking care of the apartment, calling your work?" "Actually," he paused and I could hear muffled voices in the background. Actually, Rebecca's asking if you could go to our apartment and get some things for her. Her overnight bag and some specific clothes. She gave me a list, but I don't want to leave her right now. It was the first time Rebecca had asked me for anything, and even though it was just an errand, it felt like progress. Of course, text. Me, the address, and the list. David's apartment was in a complex I'd never visited, even though they'd been living there for 8 months. That fact hit me as I stood outside their door with the spare key David had left under a decorative flower pot. 8 months, and I'd never been invited over. Inside, their home was exactly what I'd expected. Clean, modern, carefully coordinated. Rebecca's influence was everywhere, from the matching throw pillows to the inspirational quotes printed on canvas and hung in perfect alignment. But there were also traces of David that made my heart ache with familiarity. His coffee mug sitting by the sink, the same one he'd used throughout high school. A stack of mystery novels on the coffee table, his favorite genre since he was 12. A framed photo of him and Marcus from their college graduation. I found Rebecca's overnight bag in their bedroom closet and packed it according to her detailed list. Specific pajamas, toiletries arranged in a particular order, a pregnancy book with multiple bookmarks, and a small stuffed elephant that looked well-loved despite being meant for an adult. As I was closing the bag, my phone rang. Rebecca's name appeared on the screen, which surprised me since she'd never called me directly before. Sarah? Her voice was small, exhausted. Hi, Rebecca. How are you feeling? Like shit, honestly. But the bleeding stopped and the baby's heartbeat is strong, so the doctors think everything might be okay. Oh, thank God. David must be so relieved. Yeah, he is. She paused, and I could hear machines beeping in the background. Sarah, can I ask you something? Of course. When you were pregnant with David, did you ever have scares like this? It was the first personal question Rebecca had ever asked. Me and something about her vulnerability in that moment made me answer honestly. I had bleeding at 14 weeks. Not as severe as what you're describing, but enough to terrify me. I spent 3 days in bed convinced I was losing him. Were you alone? James was traveling for work. My mother drove down from Sacramento and stayed with me, even though we'd been fighting about something stupid. I remember thinking that maybe becoming a grandmother would finally make her proud of me. Did it? I almost lied, almost gave her the comforting answer she was probably looking for. But something about the moment felt too fragile for anything but truth. No, my mother never really knew how to be proud of anyone but herself. But that experience taught me that you don't have to have a perfect relationship with someone to show up for them when they need you. Rebecca was quiet for so long, I thought the call had dropped. Sarah, I need to tell you something. Okay. I know I haven't been fair to you. I know I've made it difficult for you to have a relationship with David, and I know the wedding thing was cruel. I gripped the phone tighter, afraid that if I said the wrong thing, this moment of honesty would disappear. Rebecca. No, let me finish. I've been seeing a therapist since David and I started having problems, and she's helped me understand some things about myself that I didn't want to see. I have this pattern of pushing people away when I feel threatened, even when they're not actually threatening me. What made you feel threatened by me? Everything. The way David's face would light up when you called. The way he'd quote things you'd said like they were wisdom from the oracle. The way he clearly trusted your opinion more than mine about important decisions. I felt like I was competing with you for my own husband's loyalty. It was the most honest conversation Rebecca and I had ever had, and it was happening while she was lying in a hospital bed, afraid she might be losing her baby. Rebecca, I never wanted you to feel that way. I never wanted David to feel like he had to choose between us. I know that now. But at the time, All I could see was that David had this incredibly close relationship with his mother, and I didn't have that with mine, and it made me feel like something was wrong with me. What's your relationship like with your mother? Complicated. She's very critical. Nothing I do is ever quite right. When I told her David and I were getting married, the first thing she said was that I should lose 10 pounds before the wedding so I'd look better in photos. I closed my eyes, understanding flooding through me. Rebecca hadn't been trying to hurt me specifically. She'd been trying to create the kind of close family dynamic she'd never had, and my relationship with David had felt like evidence that she was failing. Rebecca, can I tell you something my therapist told me? Yeah. She said that love isn't a finite resource. David loving me doesn't mean he has less love available for you. There's room for both of us in his life if we can figure out how to stop seeing each other as competition. Do you really believe that? I'm trying to. It's harder than it sounds. But I'm trying. We talked for another 20 minutes about pregnancy fears and family dynamics and the weird vulnerability of being in a hospital. When we hung up, I felt like something fundamental had shifted between us. But the real test came 3 weeks later, when Rebecca was put on bed rest for the remainder of her pregnancy. David called me on a Sunday evening, sounding overwhelmed. "Mom, I don't know what to do. Rebecca's doctor says she needs to stay in bed for the next 4 months, but I can't take that much time off work. Her mother is flying in next week, but she can only stay for 2 weeks, and Rebecca's sister lives in Portland and has her own kids to take care of. What do you need?" "I need help, but I don't know if Rebecca would be comfortable with..." "Ask her." "What?" "Call Rebecca into the room and ask her if she'd be okay with me helping out. Don't make the decision for her." I heard muffled conversation, then Rebecca's voice came on the line. "Sarah, David says you might be willing to help me with some stuff while I'm on bed rest." "I am, if you want me to." It would just be practical things. Grocery shopping, laundry, maybe some light housekeeping. I know it's a lot to ask after. "Rebecca, it's not a lot to ask. You're carrying my grandchild. There's nothing I wouldn't do to help make sure both of you stay healthy." That's how I ended up spending 3 afternoons a week at David and Rebecca's apartment, doing laundry and preparing meals and keeping Rebecca company during the longest, most boring months of her life. It was strange at first, being in their space so regularly. Rebecca was clearly uncomfortable with the arrangement initially, thanking me constantly for the smallest things and apologizing for being such a burden. But gradually, we fell into a routine that felt surprisingly natural. I'd arrive around noon with groceries and cook something that would last them for dinner and leftovers. Rebecca would rest on the couch in the living room, and we'd talk while I cleaned or organized. Gradually, our conversations moved beyond practical matters to more personal topics. I learned that Rebecca had grown up feeling responsible for managing her mother's emotional needs, which explained her tendency to try to control family dynamics. She learned that I'd spent most of David's childhood terrified that I was failing him as a single mother, which explained my tendency to offer unsolicited guidance. We were both women who'd been shaped by fear and insecurity, trying to protect our place in David's life in the only ways we knew how. The breakthrough moment came during my 6th week of helping out. I was folding laundry in their bedroom when I heard Rebecca crying in the living room. When I went to check on her, she was holding her phone with a stricken expression. "What's wrong?" "My mother just called. She wants to come stay for the last month before the baby's born to help me prepare. She says I don't know anything about babies and I'll need someone experienced to guide me through it." I sat down on the edge of the couch. "How does that make you feel?" "Like a failure. Like even growing a human being isn't something I can do right without supervision." "Rebecca, you're not a failure. You're 28 years old. You have a successful career, you're married to a wonderful man, and you're growing a healthy baby. Your mother's need to control doesn't reflect on your capabilities." But what if she's right? What if I don't know how to be a good mother? I looked at this young woman who'd been so frightened of my influence on David that she'd excluded me from his wedding, and I saw myself at her age, terrified, insecure, desperate to prove I was capable of protecting and nurturing the people I loved. "Rebecca, can I tell you something about being a mother?" She nodded. "Nobody knows how to be a good mother. We're all just making it up as we go along, trying not to screw up our kids too badly. The fact that you're worried about being a good mother probably means you're going to be a great one. But you always seemed so confident when David was growing up, like you had everything figured out." I laughed, but not unkindly. I was terrified every single day. I was a single mother with no idea what I was doing, making decisions I wasn't sure about and hoping they wouldn't damage David permanently. I overcompensated by trying to control everything I could control, which is probably why I was so overbearing when he became an adult. Really. And the hardest thing I've learned is that love doesn't mean protecting people from every possible mistake or difficulty. Sometimes love means trusting people to figure things out for themselves. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, absently rubbing her belly. "Sarah, I need to tell you something else." "Okay." "I lied about why we didn't invite you to the wedding." My heart started beating faster, but I tried to keep my expression neutral. "What do you mean?" "It wasn't because of your anxiety or because we thought you were too fragile. It was because I was jealous of your relationship with David, and I wanted our wedding to be about us starting our own family without interference from his family of origin." "And James went along with that?" "I told James that you'd been making comments about our relationship not being ready for marriage and that you'd suggested we wait another year, which wasn't true. But James believed me because it sounded like something a concerned mother might say." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "Rebecca, why are you telling me this now?" "Because I'm pregnant with your grandchild, and you've been nothing but kind and helpful to me for weeks, and I can't live with the lie anymore. I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm so sorry." I stared at her tear-streaked face, this young woman who'd caused me months of pain and self-doubt, who'd made me question my worth as a mother and my place in my son's life. I should have been angry. I should have been furious. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Relief. "Thank you for telling me the truth. Are you going to tell David?" It was a fair question, and I considered it seriously. David deserved to know what had really happened, but I also understood that Rebecca's confession was part of her own growth process, her own journey toward becoming the kind of person she wanted to be. That's between you and David. But Rebecca, if you're going to build a marriage on honesty, you might want to consider telling him yourself. I'm scared he'll hate me. He might be angry, but David's not the kind of person who holds grudges, especially when someone he loves is genuinely sorry and trying to do better. Over the next few weeks, I watched Rebecca wrestle with her guilt and fear about confessing to David. I also watched her become increasingly uncomfortable with the dynamic she'd created in their marriage, the way she'd positioned herself as the reasonable voice protecting David from his overbearing mother. The confession came on a rainy Thursday in May, 2 weeks before Rebecca's due date. David called me that evening, his voice careful and controlled. "Mom, Rebecca told me what really happened with the wedding." "Okay." "I'm really angry right now, not just at her, but at myself for believing it so easily. And I'm angry at Dad for going along with it." "That's understandable. I want you to know that I'm sorry for excluding you, for not questioning the story I was told, for letting months go by without trying harder to understand your side of things. David, you were trying to protect your marriage. I understand why you made the choices you made, but that doesn't make them right. Mom, I missed having you at my wedding. I missed sharing that day with you. and I can't get that back. We were both crying by then, grieving not just for the wedding I'd missed, but for all the months of distance and hurt that could have been avoided if we'd all been braver about having difficult conversations. But David, we can make sure we don't miss anything else. What do you mean? Your baby is going to be born soon. We can choose to show up for each other going forward, even when it's complicated. I'd like that. 2 weeks later, Rebecca went into labor at 3 a.m. David called me from the hospital at sunrise. "Mom, can you come? Rebecca asked for you." I drove to the hospital still in my pajamas, my heart racing with anticipation and nervousness. When I arrived at Rebecca's room, she was between contractions, exhausted but smiling. "Sarah, I'm so glad you're here. How are you feeling?" "Like I'm about to meet my daughter." "Your daughter?" David grinned. "We found out last week. We're having a girl." I felt tears spring to my eyes. A granddaughter. David's daughter, who would grow up knowing she was loved by parents who'd learned to choose honesty over comfort, by grandparents who'd learned to love without control. "What are you going to name her?" Rebecca and David looked at each other, sharing one of those wordless communications that couples develop. "Eleanor," Rebecca said softly. "Eleanor Grace, after David's grandmother, and because Grace is what we all needed to find our way back to each other." Baby Eleanor was born at 2:30 that afternoon, perfect and healthy and loud. When the nurse placed her in my arms for the first time, I looked down at her tiny face and felt something shift inside my chest. Not the desperate, terrifying love I'd felt when David was born, but something calmer and deeper. This was love, without the weight of responsibility, love without the fear of failure. "Hello, beautiful girl," I whispered. "Your whole family has been waiting to meet you." That evening, as Rebecca slept and David dozed in the uncomfortable hospital chair, I held Eleanor by the window and told her about the women who'd come before her, about great-grandmother Eleanor, who'd made mistakes but tried to break cycles, about grandmother Sarah, who'd learned that love sometimes means letting go, about Mama Rebecca, who'd discovered that vulnerability is stronger than control. "You're going to grow up in a family that chooses honesty," I told her, "that chooses growth over comfort, that chooses love over fear." 6 months later, Rebecca asked me to babysit Eleanor for an entire weekend while she and David went away for their first anniversary. It was the ultimate gesture of trust, letting me care for her most precious thing. When they returned, tanned and relaxed and clearly reconnected, Rebecca handed me a small, wrapped gift. "What's this?" "Just a little something to say thank you." Inside was a silver bracelet with a small charm engraved with the words, "Eleanor's grandma." "Rebecca, it's beautiful. I wanted you to have something that represents who you are to us now, not who we were afraid you might be." As I fastened the bracelet around my wrist, I thought about the year that had passed since Martha Henderson's innocent comment about wedding photos had turned my world upside down. I'd lost my illusions about being the perfect mother, about having the perfect relationship with my son, about being able to control the people I loved. But I'd gained something more valuable: authentic relationships built on truth instead of fear, love expressed through trust instead of control, and the knowledge that families can heal from even the deepest wounds if everyone is willing to do the hard work of growth. That night, I called Eleanor's diary entry that had started my journey toward understanding. "I hope someday someone breaks this cycle," she'd written. Looking at my son and daughter-in-law working together to feed their daughter, watching them navigate the challenges of new parenthood with patience and humor and mutual support, I realized that someone finally had. The cycle was broken, the healing was real, and love, it turned out, really was infinite after all.